Thank you everyone for coming to study with us. And we are on lesson 7. And the title, can someone give me the title for this week? What are we? Worshiping the Creator. Worshiping the Creator. Why is that important? Why is that important? Anyone? We're going to get to the lesson, but I just want to get your general take. Why is worshiping the Creator important? He's the one that created everything, even the existence of everything. Anyone else? He's the beginning and the end. Good, good. I like both answers. Anyone else want to give it a shot? In Him, we move and have our being. My sister, you're going to say something?
Yes, and the whole aspect of creation is that we were created to worship the Creator, and Him only we must serve.
So we were created to worship the Creator. Him only we must serve. Amen? So all those answers are great answers. I love all of them. Thank you so much for your take on that. Let's look at Revelation chapter 4, verse 11. Revelation chapter 4, verse 11. Can somebody read that for me, please? Revelation chapter 4, verse 11, which is our memory text.
Where are you, O Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power? For you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created.
So this author, which we know is John, is saying, it starts out with, glory to you, our God. Amen? And then he says why he's giving God the glory. Why does he give God the glory? Verse 11. Because he's worthy. Why is he worthy? Because he's the creator of the universe and everything in it. Amen? So then, why does the universe itself exist? We are, when you say universe, by the way, we start thinking about this cosmic body of planets and stars. Do you know we're the universe? We're part of the universe? So, why does the universe itself exist? Because God created it. Do we have to exist? No. We don't have to exist. Yes. There are some things right now that don't exist. We don't know what they are because we can't create them. Right? There are some things right now that don't exist. But we happen to exist. Does that make sense? Because I'm an artist, I have a small glimpse of understanding of creation. Because if I don't draw a picture, the picture doesn't exist. But if I take my pencil and start painting a painting, it exists. But in order for it to exist, I had to pick up my pencil and create it. So until I did that, it doesn't exist. Does that make sense? Yes.
And nothing, so God created the world. Out of nothing, from nothing, God created the world.
Yeah. And go ahead, Elder. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. 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 I'm one of those artists, when I draw, when I'm looking at what I'm drawing, I could probably do it to a T. Like I could replicate, like if I'm looking at you, I could draw you. I could probably do a pretty good job of drawing you. But if I'm not looking at anything, Some artists are good at that. They could not be looking at anything in their head. They just like have this picture. I'm not one of those type of artists, right? As far as designing, I can do that. Like if I'm designing a logo or something like that, I can come out of my head. So God can do these things. It's even hard to explain because God can do these things at will, right? And then when he does it, it's perfect, right? And it's just like there's no blemish in it. So the question is, why did God decide I'm going to create this thing called a universe, and I'm going to put Mark, I'm going to put Elder Palmer, I'm going to put Denise, I'm going to put Sister Price, and everyone here in it? Why? Because he desires worship. Our universe exists because God, the Creator, has made it and everything in it. And you guys heard me say this before. I had an art exercise. Create something without using any reference to what you've already seen or tasted or experienced. Pick up the pencil and do it. You can't. Right? Because if I'm going to draw anything, whether or not it's some other creature or some whatever, I'm going to need to refer to something I know already to create a version of what I know already. God doesn't need a reference point. Amen? He doesn't need a reference point. And so, the book of 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12 to 15. 1 Peter chapter 12, verse 4, verse 12 to 15. Could somebody else read that for me? 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12 to 15. Somebody who could read that for us? Or want me to read it? Yeah, if you don't mind, please.
Beloved, 1 Peter
4. Yep.
Beloved, think it not strange concerning the very trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. But rejoice inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, he may be glad also with exceeding joy. If he be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. And on their part it is evil spoken of, but on your part it is glorified. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters.
Amen. All right. So now we're talking about suffering. Right? Mark, you just talked about worshiping, and now you're talking about suffering. Why do we have to suffer because we worship?
The main issue in the book of Revelation is worship.
Yep.
And if you study the great controversy, the main issue in the great controversy is worship. Those who are going to worship God and follow Jesus, they want to go through a lot of tribulation.
Yep.
Suffering, everything, but guess what? Over us.
Yep.
Because he who overcome will help us conceal through our tribulation and our trial.
Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. So suffering is not a strange thing that goes along with worship. Go ahead.
When the suffering for it, we had Adam and Eve when the serpent started talking to them.
Yep.
So with that is the reason why we have to go through suffering because of the first sin of Adam and Eve.
Yep. The first sin of Adam and Eve, okay. It's interesting. God was preparing me. I didn't know I was going to teach today, but God was preparing me because I was looking at an interesting video yesterday. And it was a group of atheist students in a university talking to a professor who was a Christian, right? And the group of atheists, the professor said to them, listen, Peter, John, and all the apostles died because they were willing to die because of the eyewitness to experience Jesus coming back to life. Right? They were willing to die because they experienced it. They hung out with Jesus, they saw Jesus die, and then they saw Jesus resurrected. And then the atheist students were like, well, there's a lot of people that die for what they believe in. Right? And that's true. And then the atheist student gave an interesting concept. He said, well, okay, there's a lot of Nazis that died because they believed Hitler's ideology. Right? And so what's the difference between those Nazis that died believing Hitler's point of view of the world versus the apostles that died believing Jesus? What's the difference? And so the professor, I was like, that's actually a pretty good question. You know, that's actually a pretty good question. And so the professor said to them, well, okay, so here's the difference. When you could die for something that's false and you don't know it's false. And you may die for that. But the apostles weren't getting anything out of it. As a matter of fact, believing made them suffer. Does that make sense? The Germans believed that if we beat the people that are non-German, we're going to become this Aryan nation. We're going to become this powerful nation. And so they were willing to die for that because there was something better they were hoping to get. The apostles weren't expecting anything better because all they were saying is, we believe it because we saw it. Does that make sense? They weren't expecting to get a kingdom in this earth or become strong and powerful men and riches and honor and glory. They weren't expecting that. They were just so adamant about what they believe in that they were willing to die for it. So that's the difference, right? And so the professor ended up by saying, a lot of times when people are promoting a lie, once they get caught in a lie and they know they're going to go to jail, guess what? Okay, I was lying, you know? Or if they see that they're about to die for that lie, they're not going to go through with it. That's just a human instinct, right? Why am I going to go die for something I know it's not true? Why am I going to die for it? Does that make sense? The apostles were willing to die to be a witness to Jesus. Amen. Does that make sense? And so his thing was to the atheist students was, the only reason that they were willing to die for it is because they absolutely experienced it. Amen. And for them to live a lie is worse than to die for the truth. Amen. Does that make sense? Amen. And so I was fascinated by that dialogue yesterday when I was watching that. I wish I saved it now that I'm thinking about it. It was actually a pretty good dialogue. And I tend to get drawn into these atheist dialogue with atheists, and it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating. Revelation chapter 14, verse 7. Revelation chapter 14, verse 7. And so while you're looking for that, it's okay to be willing to die for the belief of Christ, but it's harder to live for it.
Say that again. I like
It's okay to be willing to die for the cause of Christ. Because you will say, well, if persecution come, I'm going to die defending this truth. Especially us as SDAs, we're programmed with that. It's harder to live for it. Because now when we live for it, our everyday life has to reflect it. It's hard. I'm pointing the finger at this guy, right? It's hard, right? Because you have to be that model person every single day. It's harder to live for it. Revelation chapter 14, verse 7.
And he said with a loud voice, Fear God and give him glory.
Yes.
Because the power of his judgment has come. And worship him in the heaven and earth, the sea and the spirit of water. The spirit of water.
Again, this theme of worshiping the Creator. It is the last book of the Bible. There must be more important things that we need to learn about than to worship. Right? It's the last book of the Bible. There's no more books in the Bible, but it seems to be revolving around this theme of worship. Amen?
Amen.
It's a call to worship. Why did God, in his infinite wisdom, say, you know what? One day I'm going to have 66 books mainly of the Bible. There are more books. And I personally believe it's okay to read them, right? Even though they're not canonized. I've read some of them. That's non-canon. But the ones that, the universal one we're all going to agree on is these 66 books. I want the last book to be Revelation. Right? And then the last book is going to be about worship. I'm going to warn them about worship. Why did God in his infinite wisdom ordain it to be so?
That was the whole point of sin being entered in because of worship.
The whole point of sin was entered in because of worship. About the threat of worship. What is the common? There's two major opposing forces as far as why we exist in this world.
Okay.
It's almost divided in half. Right? It's like you either believe in that side or this side. What are the two sides I'm referring to? Good and evil, yes. As far as our reason to exist. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Evolution or creation. Almost everyone in this world is divided into those two categories as far as why we are here or how did we get here. Evolution or creation. Right? In your estimation, which one is winning right now as far as the ideology? What do you think most people in the world believe in more? Creation or evolution? Evolution. So wouldn't it be smart on the Creator's part to say to people, the last book of the Bible is going to be about a threat to me being the Creator? Amen? Of course, in his infinite wisdom, he saw 6,000, close to 7,000 years down the line, that people would foolishly believe that creation created itself, which is ridiculous. That's what evolution is really saying. Creation just created itself. So who created creation? Right? Of course. So then you are in the creation side. There's more people that believe, and they have religions about it. They have scientific proof about it. I got people that laugh at me when I say the Earth is about 7,000 years old. Oh, you are crazy! Like you really believe that, you nutcase? 100%. I think that all the time. Like, what kind of thing you smoking, Mark? You really believe the Earth is about 6,000, 7,000 years old? What about the dinosaurs? What about all the scientific proofs and research that we have? You're going to tell me all those scientists are wrong? Right? Most of the world, that's where they stand. They're like, well, we have scientific proof that the earth existed way longer and there wasn't a need for a God. What are you talking about, this God? We created ourselves. That's the majority of the world's position about why we exist today. So then God, who is the creator, wow, that was a quick bell. Well, God, who is the creator, his last book of the Bible is to warn us about this philosophy. By the way, do you know Daniel chapter 9? The book of Daniel chapter 10 and 12, I believe it. King of the North and King of the South. You ever heard about that? King of the North and King of the South. So some people are waiting for this grand king from the North to battle this grand king from the South. All it really is about atheism versus creationism. That's what Daniel's prophecy about the king of the North versus the king of the South is about. The king of the North is where? Heaven, thank you. The king of the South is earth. So, earth philosophy versus God's philosophy. And then you'll see throughout the times in Daniel's prophecy, you'll see that there is times when the king of the North is winning. That means more people believe in creationism. And then there's a time when the king of the South is winning, where people believe more on themselves. We are a God unto ourselves. You ever heard that before? Self-worship. Self-worship. Evolutionism. And so that's the king of the South. And so you'll see this battle, and Daniel's prophecy was down to the very point of historic days that we could go trace back to. Guess who's going to be winning before Christ comes? Thank you. King of the South is going to be winning before Christ comes. All right? So that's why Revelation is a warning for us to pick the right side. Does that make sense? Acts chapter 17, verse 27. We don't have time to read, so I'm gonna assume you read it. The great news about our God is that his greatness and power are so vast that it reaches across the cosmos and into each of our lives. Yes. The nearness and furthest of God. So God is both far and God is both near. Right? In our mind, we can't understand that. God is both far because he is in his throne room in heaven, but he's near that he could touch us personally. That's amazing. Amen? And so, it's
So transcendence. Transcendence, meaning that,
yeah.
God means he's above all his creation.
Yes.
And then the immanence of God.
Yes.
Meaning that he is intimately involved in our lives. That's what you basically say.
What a powerfully comforting thought to realize our God, a God of such power, loves and cares for us.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
And so, who here have ever been on a plane? Anybody ever been on a plane?
Yes.
When you're on a plane, the plane is big to you and everything around you is big, right? Like everything around you is big. But the further you go up, those things that you left behind, how big are they? It's tiny. Even the country itself where you left looked like a little dot now. And you're like, wow, why wasn't that little dot?
Wow.
Right? And that's just a plane. Now when you push it back to the universe, when you go to Pluto, Mars, Jupiter. That's even farther away. Now Earth looks like a little dot. Now you leave the Milky Way galaxy, you go to another galaxy. Now the Milky Way galaxy looks like a little dot. Then you move on to whatever galaxy we haven't even come close to even seeing or knowing about. Then those galaxies become small little dots. And then God decided that I'm going to die for you, who's just a little bit of a speckle of dust in his creation.
That's amazing.
So God is both far and God is both near. Because he is sitting in his throne room, and angels are God to give glory and honor and praise. They are doing that right now in heaven. And at the same time, you, this little speckle of dust, he came and died for you. Oh, I know I wouldn't do it. Right? It's like going back to drawing a picture, and I drew this whole big planet and Earth and whatever on my paper. And then one little speckle of dust I made a mistake in. And instead of taking an eraser to erase it, I said, I'm going to go in that little speckle of dust and fix it. And matter of fact, risk my own being to fix it. I wouldn't do it. I'm being honest, right? But God loves us so much that not only he was willing to do it, but he did do it. Amen? Because the eraser could have easily came out. But he decided, no, I'm not going to erase that little mistake that happened there, even though it wasn't my fault. I'm going to go into that little speckle of small little tiny dust of all my vastness of creation, and I'm going to die for that. God is both far and near. Amen. Amen. And he deserves our worship.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Sure. Yes. I'm sorry. The last part. Why should what offense? Yes.
In my spirit, the Holy Spirit leading me to worship Him in the beauty of holiness. Why, if I am worshiping God the way the Holy Spirit taught me to, how I feel in my spirit to worship God as the Creator? Why should it offend anyone?
Why should it offend anyone? Okay.
Because I'm not a father.
Yes.
Because it's the way how I feel about my God.
Yes.
And I want to worship Him.
Yes.
In the beauty of holiness.
Amen. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay. All right, I'm reading, I just finished reading the chapter on prophets and kings about David dancing. So, again, God was just preparing me to teach it. About David dancing when he was bringing in the tabernacle into, what's the name? And remember his wife said, you foolish, why you, the king, are dancing in the middle of your subjects like that, right? And so that's similar to what you're saying, because David was in his spirit dancing, and then people looked at it and was offended by it. All right? So, she goes on to explain that scene is when we say dancing, it's not the dancing we're talking about. Does that make sense? When we say dancing, we're thinking about, and then everybody starts moving around and hallelujahing and, doing what they call a shuffle feet or whatever. And you say, well, I'm doing that because I'm honoring God. But God does, the way, again, I'm going to explain to the way the prophet has explained it, right? That's not worship. That's possession. Right? You could think you're doing the right thing, but Satan possesses you to do it the wrong way. Hold on. I'm going to finish. Based on prophets and kings, right? And then we can study that more.
Go ahead, explain that real last.
Okay. All right. And then, because I don't want to offend anybody. So, the way David was dancing is more of a melodious way of walking and singing to God in glory, and it's just like, and I'm not blaming anyone. Again, I'm not attacking anyone. All right? And so it was more of a melodious way of singing and reciting poems and doing those things. It wasn't the happy feet type of dancing that we think is dancing, right? Because God is a God of smoothness, order, and decency, right? And so when we step outside of those things, so it's similar to being in a nightclub. It's similar to being in those things. It's more possession than it is worship. And so there's a difference between how we do it. And this entire topic should be a Bible study, because I just went over in Prophets and Kings where David danced.